Welcome to the Time to Grow Up Dad podcast with your host, Chong. And today will be a reflective episode on the conversation I had with Dr. Hayden Pritchard. Just finished editing the video and audio as well. And as of this episode, obviously, the episode was released after doing this. But as always, it's an opportunity for me to reflect on the conversation that has happened there and then. So it was actually quite an interesting conversation because prior to talking to Hayden, I had a chat with Dean, and Dean having two, coming to three, Hayden himself having two, planning a third. And if you actually caught the episode since Dean, all that that followed, we will be having a second coming next year as well. So, and I think I might have spoken to Dean or Hayden, one of these two gentlemen, about how I don't really know how to sort of maneuver parenthood. But then again, parenthood is one of those things where you don't really know what you want to expect until you get into it, because I was the only child in my family growing up. Of course, I'm very blessed that Claire has grown up with sisters, and of course, they are a very very tight bunch. I never really had that opportunity of having a sibling. Now, it's not necessarily a case of whether my parents did try or not try. That's aside the point. Point being, as we get two of them, two of its, one he, one it at this point, it will be very interesting because I think I I never had that experience of being a brother or being a younger brother to someone like by blood. So that's going to be one of the things where I think we talked on a podcast where flexibility is going to be quite important. And I think one of the key takeaways that from there is prior to becoming a parent, you have a lot of luxury when it comes to flexibility in a sense where you have time. You literally have ample time. But the moment when you become a parent, one of the most important things that you lose, not because it's a good or bad thing, is time. And being flexible with what's being presented to you in the moment from a day to day basis, a week to week basis, you have to be flexible. If not, I think as a parent, you are going to get caught with your pants down. For example, if your kid has to be called home from school and they're sick, you don't have the opportunity to say this or that. You have to drop everything, go pick up your kid, because that is what, at least to me, a good parent would do. So I think flexibility is a very important key point from the conversation I had with Hayden. And I think the more the bigger your family will be, and to a point up till of course they're 18 and everyone moves out and things like that, you have to be very very flexible with how you approach life in itself, because things are going to be very random. You can plan, but things are going to be really really random. And so from a exercise standpoint as well, you be able to train 2 hours before. Now you have to get in and get out in 45 minutes. So the way that you structure potentially your training program is going to be very, very different to when you were potentially training for 2 hours a day with essentially very, very little to no commitments. One other thing that was also quite interesting is it seems like parents who have two kids are kind of giving me this vibe, and I'm not sure if my assumptions here are correct, but it seems that the first one's always like the anxious one. From a parent standpoint, we go into it expecting all these things, and it's like a nuclear bomb. It drops, it happens. You're kind of dealing with life being a first time parent. And going into the second, it seems like most people tend to be quite relaxed, not in the sense that we take things lightly, but it does sound like most parents who have two kids and up, always, they have been telling me that the second one is going to be a lot easier because you sort of already have that experience. But to sort of almost play devil's advocate to a lot of that commentary as well, is that Hayden and I talked about the sleep differences between newborns, and for him, Toby and Harvey, so both of his kids, have very different sleep patterns as a newborn. And whilst I think you can go into your second kid taking things a little bit more relaxed, it is still going to be very random. Back to the flexibility point again, it is going to be very random in the sense where you don't really know what to expect. Sure, there are going to be a couple things where you could kind of almost skip steps. For example, for us, potentially not needing a, what do they call it, a bassinet. That's what they call it. Having the bassinet next to our bed, kind of just skipping that straight into a cot because the first time round, the bassinet didn't really do anything beneficial. So, kind of those things we could kind of skip over. Things as well like how the mother would look to breastfeed the second one. And I think this is more prevalent to mums who have breastfed kids, is that because they already have that first-hand experience with the first one, when the second one comes, they have that almost inbuilt switch that goes, yup, like I've done this before, I know what works, what doesn't work. Things like the nursing chair, for example, for Claire, second time round, we kind of talked about that, and she was saying, you know what, like I don't even think I need a nursing chair. Just give me a bed that's probably a lot more comfortable. So it's one of those things where I think going into second, you learn a lot from your first, but I also think it is important to realize that it is always not going to be the same. And hence, back to the first point at the start of this recording here or this episode, being very flexible with your approach. As a bit of a piss take, he said, Hayden said, don't go to thirds because when you have two, it's divide and conquer. So, as a parent, you can have, for example, I will have my attention to Henry, Claire will have her attention to the newborn. Uh, you can have that one to one, but when it gets to three, a bit of a joke, maybe, maybe not, who knows, depending how you take it, really. When you have three, you are going to be spread very, very thin. And whilst that kind of is an inherent joke, maybe it is actually really true. Particularly, I think when you look at households where the the parent, either the father or the mother, no gender roles here, goes out to work full time, and then you have another parent being at home taking care of the kids full time. And I think that's probably going to be one of those big struggles. And I think there's something that we might potentially experience in our household where the one parent taking care of the two kids is going to be so burnt out, like so burnt out. The fact that they have to basically divide their attention to two separate human beings at the same time, needing two different needs, I think that's going to be a crazy amount of work. I can only imagine sort of the energy that is required for someone to give their full undivided attention to two, for the most part, not fully functional human beings, because one's probably a toddler and one's literally a newborn. I'm only going to assume that's going to be so mentally draining to the person. Yeah, it will take a lot out of them for sure. And I'm not going to sit here and say it's an easy job. I think that's probably a lot harder to do than going back to work full time, to be completely honest with you, at least the way I see it. At least the way I see it. And one last piece of reflective moments I had while sort of editing the episode as well is about routines and having time for myself as a parent, or having time for yourself as a parent. And this is quite interesting because Hayden sort of said that he tends to struggle quite a lot at night, and he was asking me for advice. And look, mate, I'm definitely not the best person for it, but I think finding time for yourself as a parent can be really, really difficult because you are stretched pretty thin. Depending on how many you have in your household, you will be stretched very, very thin. And I think for me particularly, and with Hayden, I think we are sort of in a very similar boat where there's a particular area in our life, in this case, health and fitness, where we where our careers are in and where we actually enjoy being in. I think it is also very much like, cool, I'll go train for 45 minutes. That's kind of 45 minutes of me time. And look, I'm not going to sit here and tell all parents to stop doom scrolling. I think doom scrolling is great to an extent. I think doom scrolling is great to an extent because it just allows you to shut your mind off. Now, I'm not saying everyone should doom scroll. What I'm saying is that sometimes you just need to turn your brain off and just sort of like have saliva dripping out of the corner of your mouth, looking at your phone and just kind of scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. And I think sometimes that's really needed. Some people will kind of look at this or listen to this and go, "You're dumb. You don't know what you're talking about. The research says this and this and this." But the truth of the matter is, the research says this and this and this. But if you actually look at how a lot of these studies have been conducted, they're not necessarily conducted with having a group of new parents or even parents with kids under 5 being the research participants and being part of an experiment. Most likely, these experiments will probably been done on participants who need money, college kids, go in and do the experiment. So we have to take all these things with a grain of salt. And so what I'm trying to get at is I think doom scrolling, controlled doom scrolling, if you will, can potentially be quite helpful to just help you turn off your brain, just to be an idiot for a little bit, like not think about anything. You're literally just there scrolling, and I think maybe an option, like for me at least, an option would be to always have a timer. I do have a timer. It goes off and tells me, hey, you've doom scrolled enough, time to get back to work. And usually that's kind of my signal to go back. So yeah, a very, very awesome episode. I really appreciate the chat. Again, I love doing these chats because it gives me a bit of an idea of not necessarily what to expect, but just a little bit more nuggets than what I can take into being a parent as I grow up, becoming a dad, and at least trying to be a competent dad as possible. So that's all for today. And if you guys like the episode, like, share, subscribe if you're on YouTube, and we'll be back next week, hopefully, with another episode with another guest. So till then.